Still Wakes the Deep. Developed by the Chinese Room, who is known for games like Amnesia, A Machine for Pigs, Dear Esther, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and also currently developing Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, is a horror game set on an oil rig where you take on the role of Cameron Kaz McCleary, a married man working as an electrician. The game starts off with a letter from your wife, Susan, where she threatens you with divorce if you don't get your shit together and get back home ASAP. As luck will have it, your very endearing and magnanimous boss, Rennick, has decided to offer you a one-way trip off the oil rig once he got a wellness check from the police regarding you.
Suck the fucking bacon of you wee gobshites messing with my operation!
Always had a soft spot for you, that one. A phone call interrupts your meeting with Rennick, where your co-workers warn him that they found something odd and that they should probably stop the drilling. Rennick, however, valiantly encourages his employees to continue drilling and caringly reassures them that nothing could go wrong.
I don't care if it feels off, just fucking do it! Or I'll come down there myself!
As fate would have it, a quake rocks the oil rig, forcing you and one of your co-workers to take a dip into the ocean. Thankfully, you get fished out by the others on the rig, so you're safe. The other co-worker that fell with you will turn up later, I'm sure.
I don't want to die!
From here on out, the game begins and you'll notice strange things happening around the rig, least of all being the strange fleshy growth spiraling its way around the drill and emitting this albeit beautiful shimmering light. This is the setup for Still Wakes the Deep, and it's pretty well done. You have the start of the game setting up the state of normalcy, showing you how life on an oil rig is supposed to go. You have co-workers, friends, and even people you don't really get along with, all living on this iron platform smack dab in the middle of nowhere. I struggle to think how physically and mentally draining it is to work in such an environment. Things don't get any better once the quake hits, and everyone figures out that maybe we drilled through something that we shouldn't have, and maybe Rennick should have listened when the people on the phone told him that something feels off. But regardless, that was then and this is now, and right now we need to figure out what the hell has happened. A question that is much easier to pose than it is to answer, because all you can figure out is that there's a lot of flesh growing in every corner of the rig, people are losing their minds, hearing voices where there are none, and some are even screaming like their nails are being torn off with pliers. It doesn't help that the oil rig was hit hard and is starting to fall apart, which prompts you and your coworkers to scramble to fix as much of the damage as you can to keep the rig afloat. It's in these moments where you're right in the guts of the oil rig that you start to find things that aren't really human. The gameplay is straightforward enough to understand. You get your mission, make your way towards the objective, do whatever repair work needs doing, all the while trying to stay alive and avoid anything that tries to convince you that it's actually your wife. Most of the game will focus on you traversing the various spaces on the rotting oil rig, so it won't really surprise you. Some people will call this game a walking simulator, and looking back on it, yeah, it kinda was. But I did enjoy my time with it because there was enough flair in it to keep me engaged. The oil rig is dotted with some very light puzzle action here and there, as well as some platforming sections that may or may not have QuickTime events. There were quite a few encounters with the unknown that provided tension, as well as moments where you felt like you could take a breather, just not for too long. It was more during the second half of the game that the magic was starting to wear off on me, because I had already figured out what the patterns of the game were and where this game was going to take me. That's when I got braver with my exploration. I started to push the limits of my ability to outrun an enemy rather than stealth by it. Sometimes it worked and sometimes... yeah. While Still Wakes the Deep doesn't do too much gameplay-wise to stand out, it does offer something else in exchange, and that is great sound design. The way the oil rig creaks under the strain around you, how the pressurized pipes give away when there's too much to hold back, the whispers dancing away at the back of your head when you're alone, and the blood-curdling cries of tortured souls still on the rig. All of these do a great job at making sure that there's never a moment where you can relax. You're always wound up, expecting to hear something sooner or later that will set you off to run and hide. If only the gameplay was a little more fleshed out, then it would have made a great fit for the sound design. Level design is also one of this game's strong suits. I don't know much about oil rigs myself, but from what I can gather, the Chinese room went to great lengths to make sure that the setting of this game was created as faithfully as possible to the oil rigs of that time period. The oil rig is just as much of a living, breathing character as Kaz. It evolves as the story goes on, losing parts of itself here and there due to certain events and gaining others somewhere else. I am going to make a small note here saying that I suffer from thalassophobia, which, for those of you who don't know, means that I am deathly afraid of the ocean and whatever lurks beneath its surface.
I fear no man, but that thing, it scares me.
Needless to say, I was expecting this game to absolutely destroy me in terms of how afraid it was going to make me, but sadly enough, there are very few moments in the game that focus on being thrown into the deep dark blue. I was not expecting Subnautica levels of horror, but I am nonetheless disappointed. But for me, the star attraction of this game was the voice acting. The Chinese room went and did something I didn't know I needed in my life. They recruited a full cast of Scottish actors, with Alec Newman voicing the game's protagonist, and I have to say, I loved every second of it.
Aye, he's a walking greeting miracle.
Hearing the characters talk and interact with one another is an absolute treat. It's a good thing I had subtitles turned on because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to understand half of the words being used. Whoever wrote those was quite considerate to us mundane English speakers, translating most lingo and dialects into words we can understand. I don't know who you are, subtitle writer, but you have my undying thanks. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and talk a bit about the main theme of this game, and that's gonna touch upon the mystery of the story. So if you want to avoid story spoilers, avoid this section and head over to the timestamp mentioned on screen. So, for any people who are veterans of horror games, you can already tell that Still Wakes the Deep is a Lovecraftian horror game. There's an unknowable entity that wakes up from a deep slumber and starts changing the places and people nearby both physically and mentally to the point where they lose their minds and start killing each other. There are some characters who can push through this changing influence, like our main character Kaz, that try to find a way to fix this. However, in true Lovecraftian fashion, things get worse before they get better. Much worse. And by the end of it all, the threat has grown to such an extent that it's questionable whether humanity as a whole is capable of eliminating such a threat. So, before this thing grows even further out of control, the main cast concocts a last-ditch do-or-die attempt at eliminating this creature by using the oil that has been flooding the rig. Kaz then makes the choice to sacrifice himself and anyone else who may or may not have survived in the rig by igniting the oil. The fire roars as it engulfs the entirety of the ring, taking out the unknown entity along with it. Or at least that's what we think, because as usual, this is a Lovecraftian horror game, and we all know that when faced with entities such as this, hope is futile. In the face of such an overwhelming monstrosity, there is no hope for victory. The only hope you have is putting whatever that thing is back to sleep and hoping it never wakes up again. Sadly, I had already managed to sniff out this ending since I've experienced it many times before in games like The Darkest Dungeon or Dredge, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it is still quite a compelling narrative, and that people who have never experienced a story such as this would still have a lot to gain from it. It offers a solid 4-hour horror experience for €35 on Steam, which is a bit on the steep price for my liking, but I managed to get my hands on the game by using the Xbox Game Pass, so I'm more than happy with the experience. If any of this sounds appealing to you, go ahead and give Still Wakes the Deep a try. But that's gonna be it for me. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, have a good one. The installation manager, of course. Look at you being all high and mighty in your ivory tower, bloody cunt. Fucking Rennick. Oh, for fuck's sake!